What's up YouTube? Today I want to show you something really cool that I figured out with Serum 2. So this is kind of a technique that I have explained with Serum 1, although with a new feature in Serum 2, it's so much easier. So quickly, I want to go through a little bit of a technical explanation of why I think this is so cool, and then we'll go through a couple of variations that you can kind of use this technique in, like sound design options and that kind of thing. So first things first, this technique revolves around splitting the harmonics of a waveform into odd and even, and then applying different things to them. The most effective use that I found for this is stereo. So splitting them odd even, having one set of them panned left and one set panned right. So in the previous video that I did on this technique quite a few years ago, actually, in Serum 1, the option was here in the wavetable editor, and you could clear all odd and clear all even. It looks like maybe I'm just not seeing it right now, but it looks like they've actually removed that because there's a kind of much easier way of doing it. Alternatively, we could say draw even harmonics only, and then it allows you to actually remove it manually that way, and you can kind of do it that way. But again, that's a kind of like very roundabout method, and it's also destructive. So now you have to kind of think about it before you do it, duplicate the oscillator or the waveform that you're using, paste it into the other oscillator, and then kind of do the whole setup that way, which was a very sort of roundabout method. So quickly, what I'm going to do is I'm going to initialize the preset. So over here in the warp modes, under the alt warp, we have odd and even. And so here in the middle at 50%, we have the saw wave that we started with. What I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to copy and paste this like this, so the results are the same. What I want to do is turn off the randomization so that these are going to be the same every time. And here, if we turn this down to odd and this up to even, you'll notice that these shapes are pretty strange. It's a square wave and a saw wave that's an upper octave. But for those who don't know, the square wave is basically a saw wave, but with only the odd harmonics. And a saw wave with only even harmonics is one octave up. So what we're essentially doing here by splitting this up, using this odd and even, is we're recreating the saw wave, right? I find setting the level down to about -10 helps to get it back in line. But if we have a look here, we've recreated a saw wave. And what I'm going to do to actually just confirm that is open up another wavetable, and we can look at the harmonics as well. Basically the same, right? And so the interesting thing now comes in panning these layers individually, or processing them individually, or for example having different waveforms on them in a sort of sound design context. And the reason this is super powerful is because if we have a look at these harmonics here, let's just mute these. What's happening is, because it's only odds and only evens, the sort of frequencies are kind of weaving. So at no 2 points will those frequencies ever be the same. And why that's important is that you can never have any kind of phase cancellation if those two frequencies don't exist. And so for stereo width and that kind of thing, this is hugely powerful, because traditionally in sound design we would use stuff like a chorus or a unison or that kind of thing for stereo width. And that tends to either pitch shift a sound up and down, but those frequencies still coexist, and that then kind of creates a bit of a wish-washy, phasey sound. Whereas doing it with this technique, where you're splitting the frequencies, panning them left-right, it's kind of bang on in terms of the phase. So you can do things to your bass sound, for example, to make it sound wider without any of that wish-washy effect, right? It is quite similar in concept to something like polyverse wider, although with that's using filters to split the effect. So it does alter the sound ever so slightly. It kind of gives it an almost disperser-like sound, which sounds good, don't get me wrong, but just having the ability to do this kind of thing like directly in the oscillator is so powerful. Okay, so check this out. If we enable both of these oscillators, right, the odds and the evens, and we pan them left and right, you can see here visibly we have the left channel square, right channel is double frequency or an octave up saw wave. If we sum these down, I think if we use this mid-side, because this is panned hard left and hard right, it sums back down as a saw wave. So what we're hearing is essentially a saw wave. Pretty interesting, right? Okay, again, let's compare this. So it is going to sound different because there's that kind of much wider effect. It almost sounds a little bit louder, a little bit more vibrant, but the balance of frequencies is exactly the same, right? And again, if we pan this back down to center, it's the same. So we're not necessarily limited to going full hard left, hard right. We can pan just a little bit, like -10 left, +10 right. To get just a little bit more of a wider sound. Do you know what I mean? Super, super cool. This is also really powerful with like FM sounds. Let's say, for example, this is actually from a wavetable pack, which is available on my store. I'm going to remember to put links in to that in the description. Because we can create these like much more vibrant, wide FM sounds without doing too much processing. And again, leaving them sounding pretty clean without that kind of wish-washy unisons and choruses and that kind of stuff. Okay, so here let's go to Alt Warp Odd and Alt Warp Even. Let's turn this down to -10, -10, and let's actually paste that same one here, and then we can compare. So sick. Okay, so with these, what I usually do is I will reset control on these pans, and I will actually set up a macro on both of the pans, and then we can jump into the matrix here, set them to unipolar, and set the one to the opposite direction. So when we turn it up, it gets wider. Pretty cool. I think we've actually gone too far. It should go only to 50% here, and it should actually be this way around. -50, +50. Okay, so why is this now so much cooler, being able to do it here in the warp modes as opposed to having to edit it in the actual wavetable, is now we can actually cycle through various wavetables and the setup remains the same. As long as these two are the same, that stereo width thing will be super good. We can actually do some wavetable position modulations here as well. It's also super good for bass sounds. You know, say for example, you have these kind of more growly type of dubsteppy things. For those kinds of things, it also works really, really well because sometimes you want to create this kind of extra width without too much phasiness, right? Let's just go through a bunch of examples here. Can actually put some distortion here. So with these kinds of things, if you're going to get more technical with kind of like growly basses and stuff, it'll definitely help to do a bit more of a split, right? So here in the one which is odds, odd harmonics consists of 1, 3, 5, etc. 1 is your fundamental, which is the low sine wave in a bass sound. And you don't want the low fundamental to be just on the left side, right? You could obviously hear that sounded a bit weird like that. And so with this one, we can actually go in here, edit, and let's zoom back in, and we can actually turn down the fundamental of this one. So now we've still got this split. We can actually maybe turn these volumes back up again. Oh, you know what? We'll need to do it on all of, we can go all, and we can say remove fundamental. And now we've split it, we've got the odds and the evens, but we've got no more subtone. So what we can do is we can then add that by just adding a sublayer. We want to octave it down to match these. Okay, so like I said, you're not just limited to doing those kind of stereo splits with this technique. You can actually use this in a kind of sound design context as well. So let's say, for example, I'm going to load up some more of those wavetables and just run through them. Say, for example, we want to do a thing where we have like the odds of one wavetable with the evens of another table. We can kind of combine sounds that way. Just put some effects on here. Let's use one of these new, like the wasp filter is really, really nice. Let's maybe try a multi, like a band high. Cool. Okay, so let me show you another reason why this is super cool, having it like directly as a warp mode instead of like in the wavetable editor, because it means that we can just take a bass sound that we already have, edit it slightly, and boom, results. So let me just duplicate this so I don't ruin this piece, this track that I'm working on. And okay, so here I'm not actually using this, so I'm going to remove all destinations. So here, let's just copy this waveform that I was using for this bass sound, and we can paste it here on oscillator A. And then here what we want to do is we want to go Alt Warp Odd and Alt Warp Even. And here we can jump in here and we can say all remove fundamental. And we can just do it with this one as well, just to be sure, right? All remove fundamental. Let's actually go -10 here on these ones. -10, -10. It's not always exactly -10. Sometimes you've got to earball it a little bit. And here, let's just turn the sub on. Okay, so now let's set up this width modulation on these two pans. So let's go into the matrix. Boom, boom, and set this one to -50 and this one to +50. I think I dropped the other one on 49. Okay, -50, cool. How sick does that sound? Even just subtly, just a little bit of width. So good. Okay, that's where I'm going to leave it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you want to support me, the best way to do so is either on Patreon or head over to my store and check out what I've got for sale. One last thing. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. I'll see you guys next time. Cheers.